Welcome, everybody. This is our sixth broadcast in our conversations on soil health. Really great to have you here. This time, the agency Grazing Specialists will join us, so we're really excited to welcome new participants, have many of you back, and to start yet another important topic. This series is designed for our agency's field staff to gain ideas from across the country that can be implemented locally. So when we understand how our staff and partners and customers really take successful steps to start and to ramp up soil health impact in diverse situations, we can really start to use those insights and effectively ramp up soil health activities in other parts of the country where they may not be going at full speed yet. So I know we've been having a lot of good networking as a result of these conversations. I know that a lot more connections are being made through these. A lot of our past speakers have gotten more calls and emails due to these, so we hope to build these networks and really continue the series with everybody's input so that we can share successes, lessons learned on how to engage customers, how to solve problems, how to continue to find solutions that lead to increased adoption of soil health management systems across the country. So exciting. You know, lots of passion across the country, lots of passion across the agricultural sector, but also across the public. You know, soil health is really picking up, really becoming known just about everywhere, and that's great that we're reaching that level of attention for these very important topics. As we continue these conversations, please really don't hesitate to get in touch. We want to hear from you. What are the questions that are on your mind? What topics do you think are worth discussing? Do you have speakers to recommend? Do you have insights or successes or solutions to challenges that you'd like to share on the air, or you have somebody to recommend who should share them? Are you interested in sharing your expertise or facilitating a discussion around particular topics that are near and dear to you in the field? Please do let us know. We are really interested in hearing from you. I think really each one of us has a lot more to learn as we move along in our soil health journey. And we all have something valuable to share, and so that's what this is really about, is networking across state lines, across the country, across production systems, across land uses. You know, it's amazing when you get into soil health and really looking at the system. There are a lot of lessons that apply between different kinds of production systems. You'd be surprised what you can pull from one system into another and really have success with. So we're recording this and future conversations. We've recorded the past ones. We make them available on our NRCS Soil Health team in Microsoft Teams and for public access once we get them reviewed. So see the chat on how to join the team if you're not a member yet. This conversation today, we're addressing a hot topic that we know is out there. There's a lot more conversation needed on the use of grazing for building healthy soils. And so today is the first conversation in this series where we're focused on grazing, and we anticipate that there will be others because there's certainly a lot more to discuss. Please do let us know if you have follow-up ideas. If you are a grazing person out there and you've been waiting for a chance to really engage in a grazing conversation around soil health, you've got ideas, we want to hear them. We'd really like to get that part of soil health going. So get us connected with your collaborators, with your customers across the country, and we will all continue to share the soil health journey. We have Nadine Bishop from Nebraska, J.B. Daniel from Virginia, Reginald Cunningham from Arkansas, Emilio Carrillo from Arizona, and Adam Abel from Wisconsin. So welcome to you all. Thanks for being on the air with us. Stan Boltz, our Soil Health Division Regional Soil Health Specialist and a leader in the interface between grazing and soil health at NRCS, will moderate for us today. And so we hope you enjoy the conversation. Stan and colleagues, what do you have for us today?
Thank you, Bianca, and welcome, everyone. You know, as we're talking about grazing today, it hasn't gone without notice that at the national level, at the Soil Health Division, we talk about 4 soil health principles, and oftentimes in various states you'll see 5 principles, the 5th one being integrating livestock. In reality, there's not a lot of difference between these 2 approaches. Within the diversity principle on our 4 soil health principles, we talk about integrating livestock, or diversity of animals and plants, really all the critters that live out there. And but we do recognize at the Soil Health Division that that's a very key component of that diversity principle. So it's two different ways of looking at it. If you're talking about 5 principles in your state, that's fine too. I mean, that's some areas it's not quite as feasible to get livestock in, so the 4 kind of fits in some parts of the country a little better than bringing that out as a separate principle. But not a huge deal. But just wanted to mention that. And anything you wanted to add there, Bianca, or anyone on that?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, you know, it's the really important piece is that for the large majority of our acreage across the country, integrating livestock is a critical component for truly bringing back healthy soils, and it is a challenge for many. So we acknowledge that. We wanted to make sure that the national 4 principles can really truly be applied to every production system across the country, whether you're producing field crops, whether you're producing truck crops, whether you're producing a small urban garden, whether you're on rangeland, whether you've got integrated operations, any of those, we wanted to make sure that the principles are really core principles that are part of a soil health management system on any production system that you have. But, you know, livestock are critically important, and in a lot of systems on the majority of acreage, they really would add a huge piece to soil health, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So I will leave it with that, and back to you, Stan.
All right. Well, without any further delay, I'm very happy to introduce Nadine Bishop. I've worked with Nadine a fair amount, and she's probably glad to see me cross back over the state line when we're done working together. But anyway, Nadine grew up on a small family farm in north central Kansas. She attended Fort Hays State University. She has a BS and MS in biological sciences with an emphasis in botany and range management. She started with the Soil Conservation Service. Maybe some new folks have never heard of that, but, as I did too, with Soil Conservation Service in 1980 as a range conservationist. She worked in a number of locations across Nebraska as range conservationist and district conservationist before becoming the state range management specialist in Nebraska. She is active in the Nebraska section of the Society for Range Management, especially with the youth activities of the section. So with that, Nadine, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Stan, and thanks to all of you for the opportunity to visit with you about some of our activities we're doing to promote healthy rangelands in Nebraska. Okay, when it comes to healthy rangelands, a good grazing plan and any needed facilitating and accelerating practices are the essentials. We know how to achieve healthy rangelands, but with all the environmental and economic challenges we're facing today, we just need to find out ways to spread the message to our producers so we get more implementation of grazing practices and other practices that increase range and soil health. Next slide, please. Rangeland health reflects how well ecosystem processes are functioning. Sustainably managed rangeland or rangeland managed with good grazing management principles will be healthy. And one of the best ways to promote healthy rangelands is that old-fashioned, good old one-on-one technical assistance. But to increase the number of ranchers managing for range and soil health, we need to find more efficient outreach methods. We just don't have the personnel to reach the people that we need to. Next slide, please. In Nebraska, our grasslands include tall, mixed, and shortgrass prairies, and most of our remaining rangeland is in the semi-arid climate regime, so drought is a regular occurrence, if not just a regular feature. In the late 1990s to the late 2000s, many areas of the state experienced the worst drought in history. We're talking even worse than the Dust Bowl. And some of our southwest areas experienced severe drought in 8 of 10 years of that decade. As we came out of the drought, we introduced a drought recovery project. Participating ranchers implemented at least 12 months of rest on a minimum of 20% of their acres on different acres each year. So by the end of 4 years, they had rested at least 80% of their land. The ranchers had destocked during the drought, and as they restocked, they followed NRCS recommended stocking rates, which we evaluated the land and increased those as the land improved. These photos are from the only season-long continuous pasture involved in the project. On the left, we have the land at the time of the resource inventory. That forb that's dominating the landscape is Canadian horseweed, also known as mare's tail, and it's a native annual forb that comes onto our rangeland after disturbances like drought. The photo on the right shows the land after 3 years of the project. The plant community is now dominated by prairie sandreed and sand bluestem. This project raised a lot of eyebrows among ranchers in the project area, not because of any specific outreach efforts that we did, but because you don't often see idled rangeland in southwest Nebraska. Neighbors could see the improvement as it occurred, and it was much faster than on the adjacent properties. So they'd stop into the ranchers' places and ask them about what they were doing. Peer-to-peer outreach is extremely valuable. Next slide, please. In the past 15 or 20 years, the amount of woody species, especially eastern red cedar, encroaching on Nebraska's rangeland has just exploded. And as you would expect, this tremendously impacts rangeland health, not just the biotic integrity, but also soils and hydrology. On Nebraska rangelands, once woody canopy cover exceeds 15%, we've crossed an ecologic threshold and moved into a woody invaded state. In the past, we thought that transition was reversible, but now we're finding that might or might not be true, and a little bit more on that later. Next slide, please. These two photos are the same ranch, same location, just a slightly different angle and distance from the farmstead. You can see the barn in the left-hand side of both photos. When I look at the 1964 photo, I see indications of rangeland health issues, lots of trailing, overgrazing, and distribution issues but you really wouldn't think of woody encroachment when you look at that photo. But by 2007, and actually probably by 2002, we've crossed the threshold and we now have an eastern red cedar forest. This transition is happening on a landscape scale across the Great Plains. Next slide, please. So now we're working to restore the land to a grassland state using mechanical treatment and prescribed fire. On the right, the cedars were mechanically removed. As the trees were cut, they were stuffed into the canyons from the top and the bottom to facilitate burning of inaccessible trees. The pasture was rested to build fine fuel, and then it was burned in March. The photo was taken 2 months after the burn during a Prescribed Burn Association tour. The plant community now is predominantly forbs and early successional grasses, but what we find happens is after 2 to 3 years, that community will have returned to mixed grass prairie. 15 years ago, Nebraska was a very fire-averse state, and that's been turned around partly because of necessity, because the eastern red cedar forest isn't grazable, but also because of the conservation partnership and promotion of prescribed burning. In 2002 to 2004, that was when we started prescribed burning in Nebraska. NRCS worked with a handful of landowners to conduct prescribed burn trainings. And the neighbors thought that, oh my gosh, they're going to ruin the land. So local field offices conducted numerous tours to show how the land responded. One of our natural resource districts organized a prescribed burn task force, and our local field office staff worked with district staff to put on conferences and later have moved to focusing to summer workshops that include a prescribed burn as part of the training. We have a number of Pheasants Forever Farm Bill biologists, and PF has a prescribed burn coordinator, and they are working extensively to increase the capacity of prescribed burning and developing prescribed burn associations. Nebraska Game and Parks and local fire departments and other groups are also now promoting prescribed burning on wildlife and rangelands. The Nature Conservancy and Nebraska Grazing Land Coalitions both have efforts where they're working with landowners to develop prescribed burn plans. And even the U.S. Forest Service is working with their permittees to develop burn plans on the adjacent private lands. About 6 years ago, the Nebraska Prescribed Fire Council was created. It's a landowner-led organization with agency advisors from NRCS and Nebraska Game and Parks, and it has a science advisor from University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Membership includes prescribed burn contractors, landowners, nonprofits like TNC and PF, and they conduct an annual prescribed burn conference. They testify before the state legislature about prescribed burn issues and the eastern red cedar problem, and they work to promote prescribed burning. Thanks to this diverse partnership, Nebraska's moved from a, oh my gosh, fire bad mindset to a state that embraces prescribed fire. This partnership of federal, state, and local government, NGOs, burn associations, rural fire departments, and more importantly, individual landowners has been very successful in promoting the benefits of healthy rangelands through fire. Next slide, please. Until recently, we believed that removal of brush and fire would reverse that transition from the forest state and return it to the grassland state. After removal and fire, trees begin to reappear after about 3 or 4 years. We used to think, well, that's just because we have this tremendous seed source and we just need to burn again and things will be just super fine. But research at UNL is indicating that's not necessarily the case. They're finding that there are changes to soil health that are impacting that retreeing and how rapidly it occurs. There's indications that there's change in soil structure and soil biology on those sites that have been reclaimed. So this brings new questions. What level of trees cause these soil health impacts? And can we reverse these negative impacts to soil health? That's some things we need to look at in the future. Next slide. We have an ongoing project in Nebraska with the rangeland health demonstration ranches. Participants are comparing 2 different management strategies using adaptive management and extensive monitoring to evaluate the impact of those different managements on rangeland and soil health. The projects will continue for 5 years. Next slide. 9 ranchers across the state are participating in the project, and as you might expect, there are a wide range of goals for the individual projects. At the end of the project, or near the end of the project, NRCS and Nebraska Extension will assist with the information activities that are highlighting of what the ranchers have found, and this could be a tour or a pasture walk or a more formal presentation or even inclusion in a larger event. Next slide. One of Nebraska's longest running activities promoting healthy rangelands is the Nebraska Range Short Course. This is literally a crash course in range management. In the course, Dr. Tony Perlinsky of Chadron State College and I worked together to teach the ecological sites and rangeland health portion of the course, and that encompasses about 6 hours or the better part of 1 day of the course. So there's a significant impact on rangeland health. This is a 5-day course. It's held every other year. It started in 1978, and over time, we have had an average of 25 to 30 people attend the course each time it's given. Next slide. Throughout the state, our local field office work with local ranchers to conduct numerous ranchers' holidays, twilight tours, and pasture walks. But we do have several larger outreach activities. The Nebraska Grazing Lands Coalition conducts an annual tour that includes 3 to 4 ranches in a general geographic area. Attendance at these tours have ranged from 125 to nearly 300 people. And then the Nebraska Center for Grassland Studies and Nebraska Section Society for Range Management also include range tours as part of their annual conferences. Another large Grazing Coalition event is the Traveling Roadshow. This event features a regionally or nationally known speaker who will speak at 10 locations across the state in 5 days. So this is a whirlwind trip for those speakers. And over the years, the speakers we've had included Gabe Brown, Alan Williams, and Burke Teichert. Next slide. As Stan mentioned in the intro, I'm a very strong believer in introducing youth to range management principles early. After all, they are our future ranch managers. Nebraska Range Youth Camp is sponsored by Nebraska Section SRM, and many of our field office staff participate as crew bosses and instructors in this week-long camp. The curriculum is similar to the Range Short Course. It covers all aspects of range and ranch management, but it's geared toward high schoolers. Our first camp was held in 1963, and it's one of the longest range youth camps in the longest running range youth camps in the U.S. Nebraska Range Judging is sponsored by the Nebraska Section SRM, and it's put on through a joint effort of NRCS, the Natural Resource Districts, Nebraska Extension, and Nebraska Ag Ed educators. The area and state competitions focus on plant ID, ecological site ID, and evaluation, and range management principles. The first official range judging contest was held in 1962, and participation in the contest continues to increase, and now we have more than 1,600 students participate each year. And finally, Nebraska Envirothon is part of North American Envirothon, and we've added a range topic to the state contest, as have many of our rangeland states. This reaches a different audience than most of our range activities, because science teachers usually coach Envirothon teams instead of the ag ed instructors, and there's usually significant involvement of the urban schools in Envirothon as opposed to range judging. Next slide. I know that all of the range states have an outreach program that's geared toward promoting healthy rangelands. The key is you need to identify the type of outreach that's most successful with your producers, and then just run with it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Nadine. I believe we're going to hold most of the questions for the end. Is that right, Brandon?
Sure. There's time for one, though, if you have one.
Yeah. Well, I was going to throw one out of my own, and then just considering the drought recovery project, Nadine, maybe you could elaborate a little bit more. How important is that management before the drought ever comes compared to the management during the drought?
The management before the drought, I think, is extremely important. You need to have that healthy grass, a good grass vigor, good reproductive status of the grasses going into that drought, or you're going to see a tremendous death loss of those grasses. And I've seen cases where ranches that were overgrazing and didn't have a good healthy grass community, they could lose 25, 30% of their grasses over the course of a multi-year drought.
Yeah, definitely.
Hi, this is Johanna Stan. May I ask a question?
Sure.
Hi, Nadine. Very nice presentation. Thank you very much. I have a question about something you mentioned about the changes that you're seeing in the soil health and soil structure on the site that you were talking about that you thought would revert back to a prairie. Are y'all referencing that in the ecological site description one? And is also, is there research? I didn't catch what university you said had that was talking about that. Is there research information available we can reference and look?
Right now, this is just some data that the University of Nebraska Lincoln has just uncovered. I guess they did not realize that we had those soil changes. We never even thought about checking for that. So it's preliminary information. Dr. Twidwell is in his lab are working on that, and I believe it should be fairly soon that they'll be publishing some results of their research that it describes what they're seeing in terms of the soil structure and health.
Okay. Thank you, Nadine. Yeah. Okay. So next up, we have JB Daniel. JB is the state grassland agronomist and grazing specialist for NRCS in Virginia. Over the last 12 years, he has worked to develop quality training opportunities to maintain a highly knowledgeable and competent field staff. He also works to review and revise technical materials and resource planning tools to be used by natural resource professionals for conservation planning on grasslands. He provides technical assistance to area and field office staff requests in support of Farm Bill implementation, and always looks forward to partnering with local and regional groups to conduct pasture walks and grazing schools where producers can learn and gain the knowledge and skills needed to implement prescribed grazing management and improve soil health. And I know, JB, I've seen a number of your videos, and with that, I'll just let you take it away.
Hey, thank you so much, Stan, and thank you for that introduction. Today, I'm just going to give everyone a glimpse of my personal soil health journey over the last, I guess, 10 to 12 years. You know, one advantage I had when starting this journey and with my role here with NRCS is that here in Virginia, I have one of the best resources, I think, in the country, and that being our state soil health specialist and state crop agronomist, that's Chris Lawrence. Many of you probably know him. When I started here, he was already well established, and he really headed up the soil health initiative in Virginia. So he and I were able to talk a great deal about it, how we were going to present it, and how we were going to transmit that message of improving soil health to producers and to our conservationists across the state. So in the early years of this soil health journey, we realized that, we had to develop and must present a clear message. The challenge sometimes for us is putting this concept of soil health into something tangible that our producers and our conservationists could really understand. After a lot of talking with each other, Chris Lawrence really boiled down that definition of soil health. The shortest we can get it is basically soil health being the capacity of the soil to function. And from my standpoint, there are a couple different functions we really want out of that soil. We want a soil that is able to provide that optimum medium for plant growth, using available oxygen from the soil, available moisture from the soil, readily available nutrients in the soil to provide good plant growth without having to add a whole lot of extra inputs. In addition, the second main function, we want a soil that can withstand very intense rainfall events and will not erode away, have very stable soil aggregates that will not break down under those harsh rainfall events. So the soil will absorb a lot of that water and store it as soil moisture for the plants over the next several weeks following those intense events. So recognizing that and being able to define and present a clear message on what soil health really is and what we're striving for, Chris narrowed down these 4 main soil health principles that we have successfully used here in Virginia to base all our planning around as it relates to soil health. You can see them listed around the circumference of this seal on the right. The first one being, keep the soil covered, then minimize soil disturbance, maximize living roots, and energize with diversity. So for us, being able to use these 4 very simple 3-word phrases, we can always go back to and plan in support of, that has helped us emphasize these principles and keep everybody on message. My slides are stuck again. If you would advance those. Thank you. The next thing we needed to do was engage our audience. And our primary audience, just like yours, is going to be the actual producers, those men and women across America that are farming the land, whether it's cropland or grassland. In my situation, I'm dealing primarily with the grassland farmers. We needed a way to talk to them about improving soil health, but do it in a way that makes it real. Take this abstract concept and turn it into something tangible, something they can see, they can touch, or maybe smell differences in the soil. And we did this by focusing on or using very focused audiences, pasture walks and field days where we had a group of people, typically, 15 to 50 in size, and we had their focused attention to watch a demonstration and to ask questions about the results. We primarily used the rainfall simulator demonstration, the soil slake test, and also root viewing boxes. These were 3 very, very effective demonstrations that we used at these pasture walks, field days, to capture their attention. And I tell you, the response we would get, some farmers that had been good conservation stewards for decades would come up and say, I want my soil to do that. What do I need to do to make that happen? Next slide, please. So when you do these types of demonstrations, you have to be ready for the opportunities that are going to come up. You've got to be ready for some of the questions that these passionate farmers are going to approach you with. But guess what? When we started this, I didn't have all the answers for sure. And even today, I don't have all the answers. But over this process, the last 8 to 10 years, we have learned a great deal by working with farmers as they implement certain conservation practices that we thought would improve soil health and have been confirmed to, yes, improve soil health on their farms. During this process, we had the support of our state, our SRC, and also our state conservationists to develop a great state-level conservation innovation grant project, which we were able to leverage a little bit of funding. We were able to leverage a little bit of funding and be able to really reach a lot more people. We did this through partners such as Virginia Tech, Virginia Forage and Grassland Council, Piedmont Environmental Council, who were recipients of some of these CIG awards. And we were able to pair them up with farmers who were getting ready to make these changes on the farm. We linked them together. They tracked them along in case studies and on-farm demonstrations, and both we learned a great deal and the farmers learned a great deal at the same time. So these interested farmers, they'll approach you after these demonstrations. Obviously, you need to be ready to make some farm visits, and on those visits, you need to ask a lot of probing questions, but be ready to listen to what they're going to be telling you and what they're going to be talking about in those answers back to you. And then once you work with farmers, helping them develop conservation plans, grazing systems, you can use some of those very successful sites and those very positive farmers to convey this soil health message for you. Next slide. What we were able to do is we took the learning opportunities on these CIG demonstration farms. We partnered with those groups, and we held trainings through field days and pasture walks. We were training our field staff and our partners, as well as educating our farmers at the same time, mixing these groups. On all of these demonstration sites, we were constantly relating how the management impacts the soil health principles, those that we have listed there. Ultimately, by doing this, we were able to bring in speakers from outside of the state. You see Ray Archuleta here. Ray came and he participated on this big farm field day. At this one, we had 200 people divided up into multiple groups touring the farm at different stops. Some of these, though, can be just as effective with only 15 to 20 people on a smaller pasture walk. In the end, what you really want is your farmers doing the talking for you, sharing their experience with the audience as true soil health champions. I'll put a link in the chat box right after I'm done. You can go to watch the video. It's titled From the Ground Up, Building Soil Health Partnerships in Virginia. It's about a 3-minute video that we did with one of our soil health champions, and I encourage you to go watch that. Next slide. And once these farmers have gone through this process with you and they have succeeded, and many of them are ready to tell their story, what we've been able to do here in Virginia is use some of these champions to host other events. This is an example here. Mr. Ronnie Knuckles, he's not far from our state office. We've been able to host the National Soil Health Course several times here in Virginia, and we go to his farm and look at what he's done over the last 4 or 5 years to improve soil health and his overall productivity of his grazing system. Other ways you can do this and promote your champions, working with your public affairs office to develop short written soil health profiles that you can publicize. And also, you need to find ways to give these successful farmers a platform to tell their own story, whether that's locally at a pasture walk or regionally or at the state level. We use them on our winter forage conference series each year. Also, you can write articles, whether it be in a newspaper or for a newsletter. We do that with the Forager newsletter that's throughout Virginia. And as a result of some of these CIG projects, we've been able to develop short soil health video testimonials, typically about 5 to 8 minutes long, letting the farmers kind of recap what they've done and what it means to them. Next slide, please. So some farmers will see your demonstrations and ask you, how do I improve soil health? But other farmers that you work with, they will not have soil health in mind when they come to you. So sometimes we have to see the situation through the eyes of the farmer. And often what they see and what they know is their pastures have low soil fertility or poor fertility, low plant vigor, their stand is thinning, they got more weeds and or brush encroaching. They come to you for help. Well, from the conservation standpoint, we base our solutions on good pasture and good grazing management. So we can come at it from our standpoint, addressing their resource concerns and using practices such as nutrient management to address those nutrient deficiencies, using herbaceous weed control and brush management, identifying and then treating those pests with the appropriate products. Once we get that headed in the right direction, the next part of that conservation plan typically involves pasture and hayland planting. And we can help these farmers achieve their goals that way. And at the same time, we get them on progress to improve soil health. Next slide. And in my humble opinion, the ultimate goal is to get every grassland farmer here in the state of Virginia on the way to prescribed grazing management. I think this is the ultimate soil health practice. It's managing the whole system, not just one little part of the pasture. Okay? So obviously there's a process to get these farmers to that stage. We've got to meet them where they are and help develop that conservation plan, leading them down the road to prescribed grazing. We often can help them develop the grazing system and emphasize in that grazing plan how to manage the livestock and harvest the forage without overgrazing, and also providing the proper recovery periods between grazing events. Let those plants and those forages to grow out so they can maintain themselves. They can develop those deep root systems and be healthy, vigorous stands. In the process of this plan, yes, it's very important for us in the pasture land side of things to designate and use a sacrifice paddock or sacrifice area. So when we run out of forage during hard times during the year, we don't beat up and overgraze and tear up the rest of the productive pasture acres. We isolate and feed the livestock on these sacrifice areas until the rain comes and the forage grows, and we can continue grazing again. Next slide. I've covered a lot of information, but one of the things I want to emphasize as I close is our relationship to our partners and what we've been able to do partnering with other entities. I mentioned some of them, and a great partner has been Virginia Tech, but we have a coalition of partners. We call it the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. It's the whole list of partners who have signed on with letters of support, but they've put action with it. And one of the big things that it just came out was announced today. Virginia Tech just posted a job opening for a full-time soil health coordinator position. This is a big deal for us here in Virginia as we continue to expand our reach and promotion of soil health and try to get farmers to implement. So that's all I have. Is there time for a question now?
That's really exciting. I did have one quick question. I don't know if maybe you mentioned it already, but with your soil health champions, is there a mentoring program associated with that?
Well, right now, one of our partners, I mentioned the Virginia Forage and Grassland Council, they are participating in a project partnering with Virginia Tech, putting together a very small mentoring network, farmer-to-farmer or peer-to-peer network of mentors. And they're using select farmers, some of which are some of our soil health champions. They've gone through this process. They've succeeded greatly on their own farms, and they're ready and willing to share what they know with other farmers in the region. So the short answer is yes.
Okay, well, hello, and my name is Reginald Cunningham, District Conservationist. I notice the rest of the members of the panel are grazing specialists, but I'm a District Conservationist as a title, but I have about 40 plus years of livestock experience. I grew up on a livestock operation on a small farm in Atkins, Arkansas, which is kind of west central Arkansas. And 22 years now, I've been working for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. I started out as a humble soil conservation technician. Then I was promoted to a soil conservationist. And for the past 8 years, I've been a district conservationist. The county that I currently work in, White County, Searcy, Arkansas, we have a pretty diverse area, and we have livestock and forestry to the western half of our county, and the eastern half of it is primarily row crops. I noticed you see the picture. I got about 16 years of barbecue experience. I've been cooking barbecue as long as I have been almost working for the NRCS, and got 3 children. And right now I'm almost to 1 year of virtual learning. So a lot of experience goes on around here. The photos that you see are my Angus bull and a cow and a calf that we actually raise on our farm. And, we've been talking about promoting soil health and rotational grazing. One of the things is that I don't own the land that we graze our cattle on. And my parents and my uncles, they still have that old way of doing things, and they just change. I said, look, we've been doing this for several years now. We really need to start focusing on doing some of these things that I've been working on. So anyway, next slide. We've have tried, and hopefully soon they will start implementing some of the things that I've been working on for a long time now. But promoting rotational grazing, as you heard JB speaking prior to me, is that outreach is a key. When I started working with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, I would say that there was some interest in soil health, but primarily we were an agency that was putting conservation on the ground and really not paying a whole lot of attention to soil health, especially in the county that I was working in. Our conservation partners play a key role in helping getting the word out to our landowners. Here in Arkansas, we have the Arkansas Grazing Land Coalition. They do a wonderful job of putting together field days and workshops to where landowners can come in and get information from well-known individuals from around the country, and as well as local producers who have experienced some of our conservation programs and have done a good job on leading others in our conservation efforts. We also work closely with our conservation districts. The University of Arkansas, we have a wonderful staff of individuals who are knowledgeable about rotational grazing and our soil health systems. And then we also have local work groups where we can provide certain specialized attention towards our programs that we provide on a local level. One of the things that we have tried to do here in the county that I work in is that on a rotational year is that we do a local-led funding for our livestock producers so that the competition of the EQIP dollars isn't as tough on our landowners. so that, we can actually get those individuals who are interested in our program to receive some cost assistance. In this picture that you see the left of the screen, we have a landowner, a private landowner, who was a beginning farmer who received some of our cost share assistance through the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. And he was leading an effort to promote some of our programs that we provide. His operation was a success, and it continues to be a success. And he was introducing our programs not only to other local farmers, but beginning farmers and veteran. He was a veteran farmer and a beginning farmer, and he wanted others to be able to know about some of the things that NRCS was doing. On the photo to the right of the screen, my soil conservation technician at my office, he and his wife both work for the Natural Resources Conservation. And they were doing a demonstration on their farm that promotes rotational grazing, some of the practices that they have installed on their own without cost assistance. And it's really helpful for landowners to be able to see things with their eye and not just hear about it. We also encourage field days. So, we haven't had one this year, but we have tried to, in the past, have a field day every year so that we can promote our rotational grazing systems as well as conservation practices with emphasis towards soil health on some of our existing farms where landowners have received cost share. And then when we also try to start our implementation for things such as the tire tanks, as well as electric fencing and other practices, we like to invite the participants to come out and be able to see those things being installed so that they would be able to know how to implement them themselves if they were wanting to install them on their own. Next slide. All right, as you see here, some of the practices that we promote, electric fencing, which is a big key to rotational grazing. Of course, you can do rotational grazing with other types of fence, but electric fencing is a little more economical for some and more flexible, especially when you're trying to reduce the size of your fields. This first picture that you see with the worn out trail going across the field is some of those things. I call it a high traffic area where cattle are continuously taking the same steps every time that they go and get water, and doing a rotational grazing system. The livestock are able to go to a watering facility and without having to all go at the same time, things of that sort. This also helps control on erosion. So these are some of the practices that we provide and really promote. Also, when landowners already have an existing pond to the lower left corner, that is an example of a floating access for a livestock watering pond. And that floating access is fenced off also with electricity. And so cattle will be able to access that watering facility and be able to exit out. We put heavy rock on there just so that they won't be having to stand there for so long. They'll get their drink and go ahead and leave. Permanent water tanks is another thing that we like to promote. Instead of landowners coming in and wanting to build a pond for their livestock, we would rather them to put in a permanent drinking facility. And then the picture to the far right corner, I think I heard JB talking about sacrifice areas and then setting a piece of ground aside for additional grazing. And here in Arkansas, we really don't get the snows that a lot of people in other parts of the country get, especially in the north and the northwest. But occasionally we do have some snows, and if landowners are able to have a sacrifice field, we try to promote them to set some land aside so that they can actually have some additional grazing through the winter months. They call that stockpiling, and so that's a real important practice to extend your grazing throughout the year. Also, it helps reduce the cost of having to have to feed hay and things of that sort. Next slide. So, like I said, I really didn't have a lot of things to say as far as the science behind it all, but how we actually promote things here in my county. And we kind of do the same things across the state. But to go on and say how soil health has impacted my job, I know there were several individuals here in Arkansas that are still part of the Arkansas Grazing Coalition. Some are part of the Arkansas Soil Health Alliance. But Stan Rose, who's a former district conservationist, he was one of the first individuals that I knew that actually had a rotational grazing system. And then many of you may know Ron Morrow. He was our former grassland specialist here for the state of Arkansas, as well as Ralph Harris was our resource conservationist. And then back in 2008, I think soil health was really starting to get promoted. And I had the opportunity to go up to Minnesota to a soil health course. And there, Ray Archuleta and some others who really demonstrated the very importance of the soil health and the things that we need to make sure that we paid attention to. And it really opened up my eyes and allowed me to be able to promote these things on a local level. So that's what I have for you.
All right, Reggie. Hopefully you guys can hear me now.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Hey, I might have missed it, but about how many pasture walks do you do in a typical year there?
It's always good to do one kind of once every season, just because, the different times of the year, different things are available. Here in the winter months, we don't have the amount of forages that most places have, just because it gets pretty hot here in Arkansas. So we try to do one each season. It's a good thing to do.
Okay. I always just called you Emilio. I didn't. Emilio's a sixth generation Tucsonan whose family came to Tucson in the late 1800s to ranch. He's a University of Arizona graduate with a BS in range management. He has worked for NRCS for 25 years, so you're still kind of a youngin' there, Emilio. His career with the Natural Resources Conservation Service began as an intern in 1996 in Wilcox, Arizona, while attending the University of Arizona. Upon graduating He began working full-time in Tucson for NRCS. During that time, his major responsibilities were to provide landowners, both farmers and ranchers, with conservation planning and management advice on private and state trust lands. His current position with NRCS is Area Rangeland Management Specialist. He's responsible for training new employees, quality assurance, and keeping staff current with new technology. For many years, Emilio has been on multiple national NRCS training cadres where he has instructed NRCS employees across the nation in conservation planning and range management principles. He has served as acting NRCS State Rangeland Management Specialist and as acting District Conservationist. So with that, Emilio, take her away.
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate that. Let me see if I can get this thing working. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining in today. And it's really good to see that all of the previous speakers, as well as myself, are pretty much on the same page. And it's amazing to see rangeland health take off, as well as soil health principles and concepts. It's my pleasure today to speak with you on my experiences with rangeland health. Arizona has been one of the states that have employed rangeland health pretty much from the early stages, many, many years ago. Let's see, next slide. Okay, I don't know if I did that, but today I'm going to discuss my experiences in rangeland health as we approach it in Arizona. But first I'll give you some background on the resources, the landscape, the climate, and such that happens here in Arizona. I'll give you a brief overview of rangeland health for some context, and I'll talk about what I find to be effective in spreading the word, as JD put it earlier this morning, to both planners and clients. I'll provide some examples of that aha moment that I've seen as folks start to understand the concepts as they're implementing conservation practices. And lastly, I'll briefly touch on emerging technology. So my work area in Arizona covers the southern half of the state. Arizona is an extremely diverse state in its resources, the climate, soils, and its producers. And as you can see, we have a large elevation gradient. Consequently, we have a wide range of precipitation and temperatures. Because of that extreme variability, Arizona has many different and unique plant communities. Going from the lower elevations to the upper elevations, we have the Mojave Desert going to the Sonoran Desert, which is typified by the giant saguaro cactus you see there. And then it goes into the semi-desert grasslands, where the movie Oklahoma was filmed, believe it or not. And moving up into the pinyon juniper and as high as the ponderosa pine. And soil health principles and rangeland health principles apply to all these communities, even though there's such a wide variety in those plant communities. We also have a wide variety of land ownership. I mention this because, as you will see a little bit later, we not only have to promote rangeland health and soil health to producers, but other agencies as well. As you can see, we have just about every land jurisdiction possible in the United States. The average size ranch in Arizona is approximately 20,000 acres. And one thing to consider is, how do we apply rangeland health concepts on such large tracts of land with all the different combinations of ownerships that are possible? For example, I have one ranch that I work with that's roughly 78,000 acres. Now, I believe many of you already have some familiarity with rangeland health, but for those who may not, in a nutshell, rangeland health looks to assess and interpret three ecological concepts: energy flow, water cycle, and the nutrient cycle. Now, in rangeland health terms, we call those biotic integrity, hydrologic function, and soil stability. And we realize that these processes do not function exclusively from one another, and that altering one has consequences for the other. These three processes, when in balance, are considered functioning. And to take it one step further, the surrounding area can affect how those processes function on a given site. For example, a bottom site which receives run-on from adjacent uplands or hills can be significantly affected by management actions on those neighboring sites. So if an upland had low ground cover due to overgrazing, let's say, it could produce more runoff and sediment than expected for that bottom site. Conversely, if it had more cover than expected, it could reduce runoff and potentially dry up that bottom site. So we need to look at the system as a whole. That brief background on rangeland health may be common knowledge to many of us nowadays in the agency, but the struggle is, how do we help our clients to grasp those concepts and apply it to their operations? Which leads us to spreading the word. How do we do that? Really, our jobs are to educate our staff or producers, depending on our position, on what I just discussed. Discussing these concepts with other agencies is also imperative, especially in a state like Arizona and other states throughout the West, which has so many different land jurisdictions. Agencies such as the Forest Service are the decision makers and have the final say on what happens on their land. In Arizona, we do a lot of coordination, whether on planning or through training as it applies to rangeland and soil health principles. You know, after all, if the rancher is on board with implementing a grazing system, which we've talked about a lot today, that will help improve those balances and equilibriums, it will be all for nothing that the Forest Service staff is not on board. We'll never reach our goals once that happens. Also in Arizona, we're lucky enough to have a bunch of long-term exposures like this one. You can see the fence line contrast in the upper left photo. We also have the Santa Rita Experimental Range, which is the world's longest running range research station in the world. And because of this, we can show folks the benefits of healthy rangeland systems. At this particular site in the upper left-hand corner, we happen to have long-term monitoring data along with grazing records. And looking at the chart, you can see the difference in frequency of key species. Now, Sidus grama is a preferred species, and it is abundant in the exclosure. And this is the climax or historic potential plant community from the ESD that we're looking at and that we're striving for. Outside, however, of the exclosure, a different story is going on. And you can see basically that Sidus grama and blue grama have switched places, as well as the exotic South African lovegrass, layman lovegrass, has occurred outside of the exclosure. Showing people in the field the effects of a grazing system and seeing their reaction is awesome. It never gets old in my 25 years experience. When I get a rancher to visit an exclosure and they say, wow, this ground feels really spongy in here, I immediately know they're wondering why that might be, and they start to draw connections. So we dig a hole and texture the soils and look at the things that we normally do when we're doing our inventory through the planning process. Then we go outside the exclosure and do the same. They begin to see the differences and make the connections themselves. They make comments like, it was easier to dig inside the exclosure, and gee, the soil is wetter, deeper than that other hole. The soil is dry almost to the top. I've even used a penetrometer from time to time, but just as effective is using a flagging pen and have your client or your producer see if there's any difference and how far they can push it into the ground with their hands. You'd be amazed at how effective that little demonstration can be in terms of soil compaction, let's say. Now, we've all seen this situation, stereotypical fence line contrast. And I bring this up because it reminds me of the early days in my career. I would always wonder how I would get the message across to our clients about thinking how the landscape system works as a whole and not individual parts. We all talk about prescribed grazing and we tend to focus on certain practices, but we never really get the message across of looking at the whole system. But Mother Nature doesn't change fast, and nor do people. So although I would suggest certain practices like prescribed grazing to my rancher, they wouldn't necessarily bite right away. But some, it took years of planting that seed about these concepts. And then one day out of the blue, a rancher would call up and say, hey, I've been thinking about what you said, let's do some stuff. And before you know it, you're off and running. But we have to keep in mind that our clients have a business to run, and to change systems, even minimally, is intimidating and a big risk potentially. But if you can convey these concepts as it relates to the business side and show them that it can be profitable or reduce risk, they may be more willing to try. For instance, recent data, we've noticed that producers who are managing the land resource as a whole and looking at their entire operation, they've improved their resiliency to drought. And when the rains finally return, the plants respond better and faster, and then the producers who didn't keep these concepts in mind or are not considering the system as a whole on their operation. In my experience, getting people outside on the ground, looking and discussing these concepts is the most effective by far as compared to any other method. In our profession, most of us are outdoors people, and so are our clients. And seeing differences on the ground with soil, the plant, and livestock goes a long way in spreading that word. Most times, all of our producers need is just someone to tie all these concepts together and point that out to them. And the conservation planning assessors is a vehicle to do that. And rangeland health and soil health kind of becomes second nature when we consider all of these concepts in the planning process. Sometimes we spend a lot of time just focusing on one part of that system, one conservation practice, like prescribed grazing or burning or water distribution systems, that we lose sight of the interactions that occur, and sometimes we're focused, and sometimes the one we're focused on is not necessarily the problem. It's not the root of the problem. It could be the unraveling or the imbalance of these principles. The last thing I'd like to touch on is technology. Technology is moving at a pace like never before, and it will most likely never slow down. We as people are all about quick, easy, and readily available data or information. With remote sensing data easily available and free in most cases, we can extrapolate our field data to larger areas with a certain degree. This helps us to see more areas in the field without having to look at every acre of every operation. This allows us to be more efficient and draw those connections and show our successes of our clients to other people. Cell phones are amazing tools. There is so much possible with all the different apps available. It's amazing. In Arizona, we are playing with the idea of using ArcGIS Survey 123 to do rangeland health. And it's very easy to build that rangeland health form into that platform. You can take a picture, it records a GPS point, it has a survey, the rangeland health questions there, and it's all linked to a server. So if you happen to be out of cell signal range, that when you get back into cell signal range, it's automatically linked to a server. And when you get back to the office, you just got to log onto your computer and your information is there. So no more transferring field data sheets by hand into an Excel spreadsheet. Now, how great is that? There are many other tools out there, and we can spend all day on technology, but we don't have time. So just keep technology, and we've talked about it a lot already today of some of the new tools out there. Yeah, I would encourage everybody to embrace technology and don't shy away from it. It was mentioned earlier about CIG, JB, I believe it was, and we are in Arizona working with the University of Arizona through their CIG to promote and get workshops and more educational outlets for soil health. And with that, I'd entertain a few questions, or we can wait till later.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Emilio. We're going to have to probably move right ahead. You're kind of pushing up against the time thing here. We want to give Adam enough time too. So I'll just go ahead and introduce Adam. Adam's passion and drive is teaching people about how to transition to rotational grazing. Since the age of 8, Adam has directly observed the benefits of this form of farming. This is when his family farm started grazing the dairy herd and later the beef herd. Adam saw that the economic, livestock, and soil health benefits gained by rotational grazing are quantifiable and real. This is an important message Adam shares with every producer. For the last 17 years, Adam has primarily focused on helping livestock producers transition to grazing. He enjoys sharing his knowledge and has assisted hundreds of producers to be successful. Adam currently lives in Appleton, Wisconsin with his wife and 3 children. When he's not in the field with farmers, you'll likely find him on a boat enjoying Wisconsin's many lakes and rivers. All right, Adam, so with that, take it away.
All right, I was going to start out and talk a little bit about myself. My dad started dairying when he was in high school yet, and we moved to the current farm we're on right now, and he did not get into rotational grazing because it was something he thought this would be awesome to do. We had stray voltage really bad on the farm, and there were a lot of health issues with the animals, and it was basically to the point where he was going to lose the operation. So he ended up kicking all the cows out. And he kind of came to rotational grazing kicking and screaming. In 1988, that was the first time that there was a Wisconsin grazing conference, and my dad went to that. I was 8 years old, and I'm lucky about that. I still actually have the folders from that first conference. I plan on keeping them for the rest of my career. But that was the year we started stringing fence. We were a dairy. He switched to beef, and now he does grass-finished beef. I give you that background because these are most of the people I work with right now, dairies and beef operators, and it's really helped me see some of the insight. I understand what it takes to move cattle every day. I understand the benefits and the struggles, the going out there when it's wet to move them, and that's been really useful for me as a field tool when I'm talking to people about transitioning over to grass. These pictures right here are some pictures I took the other week when I was at my folks' place. The upper left corner is a site that had been all wintered on, bale grazed on 2 years ago. We've done nothing there but graze it. Chickens and grass and some steers that are maybe a couple months away from being finished. That's just one of the smaller groups that my dad's got out there. Everything we do on our farm has been all grass since 1988. So go ahead. So the area I work in right now is the Wisconsin Great Lakes Restoration Initiative area. It's one of the largest concentrations of dairy CAFOs in the world. Actually, I believe it is probably the highest concentration of CAFOs in the world. There are other areas that have more CAFOs, but we've got a lot of them here. And a lot of the dairies we work with are, 500 to, 5,000 cows. I mean, that's not uncommon. But that being said, there's still a lot of 40 to 250 cow dairies here. So we've got a pretty wide range. The other thing that we have a lot of is smaller beef herds. When I say small, I'm talking 20 beef cows to maybe 150 to 200 beef cows. So we kind of got a range, but most of our agriculture is dairy or beef, and it's animal agriculture along with cash crops. Please advance the slide. So with all this dairy going on and with my background, one of the things that I always like to focus on is rotational grazing. One, because I looked at this from an economic standpoint, from a labor standpoint, from an environmental standpoint. One of the things that I've enjoyed about my job is the fact that I've been able to go out there and work with grazers. It's one of the reasons that I'm still with the agency. I really enjoy promoting grazing because I've seen the benefits of it. And I've seen the benefits of it from a personal standpoint, from another producer standpoint. I've had producers who are losing the operation convert over, and they've been able to save their operation and continue on because of grazing, because they're able to cut their costs. And these are all things that I recognized as a kid, but I wasn't able to quantify until you actually start digging into the numbers and start going into that. And when you start to look at the real benefits of this beyond environment, beyond soil health, I mean, this is an opportunity for family farms, for farms to stay in business, and not only to stay in business, but to make more money and to be more profitable. I mean, there's no downside to this if it's something that works for your operation. So one thing that we do here, like I said, there's a lot of CAFOs here. When I say CAFO, we're talking about, 1,000 cow dairy operations. They're pretty well established. They're not really interested in taking their dairy herds out of the buildings and barns that they've built. I mean, we have millions of dollars invested for that. So if you're not going to graze those, what animals do make sense to graze? And there's a very obvious choice there, and that is the dairy heifers. Right now, we're seeing a mass exodus of heifers in the state of Wisconsin going down to Nebraska. And the reason they're going down there is, one, to get rid of one part of labor that the farm has to deal with. But the other thing that they're doing is they're on dirt lots, and they're seeing some benefits to that, some health benefits. And to me, it doesn't really make a lot of sense if you're going to ship your animals across 3 to 5 states. And no offense to Nebraska, I love it, but that's a long ways to haul some dairy heifers, especially when we've got some real opportunities up here. So I started digging into the numbers. And one thing that you're going to see with all of my presentation here, I like to tie everything back to the university. First of all, I look at numbers from actual scientific data, and the really great thing about this, I have to quantify that, is I looked at Wisconsin numbers, Minnesota numbers, Illinois numbers, Vermont numbers, New York numbers. Just about every major university did studies across the board for dairy, and they all found basically the same things. So I have several studies in here that I've referenced. A lot of them I'm just going to use general numbers. If you want specifics on that, let me know. I'll send it to you. I'll tell you exactly where I got the stuff from. But the first thing I did was I broke down our dairy heifer costs. What does it cost to bring a dairy heifer to the string, to the milking string? And it's $2,200, and that's actually old data. It's quite a bit more expensive now. And if you go a little further, that is the second largest cost on most dairy operations in the state. So we know that dairy cows, they're the expensive part, but here we've got these dairy heifers that are extremely expensive to bring into the milking string. They're a huge commodity, but this is also the opportunity. They have the lowest nutritional feed requirements out there, the bred heifers, and they're the ones that require they've got the most flexibility with management. So we looked at how we could do that. Next slide, please. So I started breaking some numbers down, and these numbers are actual numbers that I was given to by quite a few farmers. I'm lucky enough to have a really great relationship with a lot of the producers I work with. They didn't give me permission to just share their exact numbers, but I've combined numbers from across the board and kind of consolidated them. And I know that it costs $250 per head per day to raise a dairy heifer. And actually that number's quite a bit higher. I mean, we're seeing up to $3.50 a head per day. The reason I did $250 was because I wanted to be very conservative when I'm giving this presentation. The other thing I know based off of actual numbers from producers I work with is that we can raise heifers on pasture for $1.50 a head per day or less. And I'm working with some people who are less than 70 cents a day. That means there's a $2 spread. I was just out on pasture the other day with a producer, and he's saving $2 a head a day. He has 300 heifers out there. That means every day he's saving $600 per day for grazing his dairy heifers out there. His quote to me was, "I can't afford not to graze." Now, when you start tying that back into the total picture, the economics, the labor, the soil health, the environmental benefits, it's really a fun thing. And the one thing that I got really excited about with grazing, not to mention just the fact that I've seen it, I've seen the benefits of myself, but we can really have a great impact on the environment just by starting to implement some of this. And I agree, like, to me, grazing's like the epitome, the ultimate, you know, it's got everything. It's got all the principles of soil health that we want to see. We've got armor, we've got minimizing disturbance, we have diversity, we've got livestock integration, and we've got a continual live root. Even in Wisconsin, in the wintertime, we've got living roots because we've got that plant there. So even if it's -40, we're still calling it because we've got microbes down there going. I want to say for a fact too, just so you know, every picture in this presentation are producers I've worked with who we've taken over the past couple of years. This particular farm is, he runs about 500 cows, and we just put these heifers out on site last year. And another thing I want to point out about rotational grazing is that I get a lot of people telling me that, you know, that's not production agriculture. I've stopped dealing. The reason I dug into the numbers so much was because, you know, if we want to promote things and we want to promote things that are environmentally feasible, we need to make sure that we come armed to these conversations with real numbers and real facts. I don't mind if someone doesn't want to graze. Maybe it's not their thing. That's fine with me. But what I do not take anymore is the fact that it's not an economic or a production type of agriculture. We can talk about it in a real fashion. I take people out to farms all the time, and we have real numbers about that, and that's been really a good thing. The thing that surprised me most when I was talking initially with a lot of these larger dairies was I thought I was actually going to be laughed off the place. And most of these guys actually recognized the real benefit of getting their animals out. They just weren't sure how to do it, which was the fun part for me because I can show you how. And we've had a lot of success doing that. So the other couple things I want to point out, one thing is that another study that was done by the University of Wisconsin was that these heifers coming off pasture, they are producing up to 2,000 pounds more milk their first lactation. So so we got the environmental benefits, we got more milk, and we've got great health benefits from it. There's really no downside to this. And when I say tie this back to all of the different studies, I've got all the different anecdotal conversations I've had with landowners now that I don't even need to tie it back to a study anymore. We can just take you out to farms and people are willing to share their numbers and show. So it's been a lot of fun. Next slide, please. So this is a study that was done in Pennsylvania, and there are some huge environmental benefits to putting grass back in the landscape compared to conventional tillage. And whether it's cover crops or whether it's grazing or wherever you go, the one thing I really like, and this is why I say grazing is kind of the epitome for me, is because we see some real numbers here. The point that I wanted to make with this slide is I had a conversation with my mentor the other day, and he's running a nutrient management model that Wisconsin has called SNAP, and we're seeing, actually based off of that, quite a bit higher numbers than what you're seeing here. So when it says 24% less sediment loss, based on the models we're running with pastures, we're getting even better than what this Pennsylvania study did, which is why I really love this practice, because once again, there's no downside to it. We've got cows outside, we've got great for the environment, we've got awesome soil health, and you know, it's economically feasible. We talk conservation all the time, but if we can't keep people on the farm because of our conservation, if a conservation practice costs more to the producer to install and maintain, what's the point of it? This is another reason why I really love discussing grazing. Next slide. So one other thing about the land here is I'm right by Green Bay. We are surrounded by large CAFOs. There's a lot of competition for acres and the cost of acres, just because of subdivisions and a place to go with the north. So we are talking about extremely expensive land. $8,000 to $15,000 an acre is really what we're seeing in this area. And I've actually sat down with different lenders, and we've talked about grazing across the table with the farmer there. We have myself and some of my co-workers have worked with some of the larger lending units or agencies in the state of Wisconsin, and we've actually dug into the numbers of what it takes to graze. And very happily, I'm able to say that the one lender in particular for the largest agricultural lender in the state is now actually buying land and custom grazing animals himself because he sees it as a benefit. So that's been a lot of fun. But to sit across the table from somebody who doesn't understand this or is really scared about this, that's a really big deal. And you gotta come to the table with some real stuff. Like it was said before, changing an operation is a big deal, and there's a lot of risk involved with that. And my goal here is only to help people. And there's a transition that occurs with this, and we need to make this smooth so that way they can actually do that and do that successfully so they can actually see the benefits of this. So these are some cool heifers. What I want to say about this picture before we jump to the next site here is this picture is on an extremely sensitive site. It's probably one of the highest sediment loading streams in one of the GLR area, the Great Lakes Restoration Area that goes into Green Bay. And previously this had been all row crop, mostly corn silage and alfalfa, probably 2 to 3 years of corn silage and then 2 to 3 years of alfalfa. There were multiple gullies on this site, and there were designed waterways and wasp cobs that we're going to put in there. We scratched it all, put a fence around it, and started grazing it. And this is just one of many examples that I have where just by establishing the soil and getting the soil functioning again, so that way we've got infiltration occurring upstream from these sites that are eroding, we don't have that influx of water. And I see this time and time again. And like I said, soil health is a concept that I came to, or was taught to me a number of years ago, but these were all things I was observing, and it was hard to actually put that into words. But you see this time and time again. And one thing that I've noticed is that a lack of erosion doesn't necessarily mean soil health, but if we can get the soil to function and to infiltrate, so many of our conservation practices probably won't be necessary. Next slide. So this is just over the hill from where those heifers are. And what we had on part of this farm here was we had some really great conservation on the fields. We had soil that wasn't eroding on this one particular site, the field we're looking at there. And then on the other side, it was eroding really bad. But this is common in Wisconsin where we've addressed erosion in the fields, but then you go into the woodlot and it's gone. So we've sped the water off the fields. We didn't have infiltration, and we're seeing mass erosion in these wooded areas down to our riparian areas. If you look in the picture here, you can see quite a bit of erosion in the stream on the bottom there. And then if you look over the picture on the right there, this is the exact same site. I was hoping to get back out there and take a picture from the same angle. I didn't have time, but you can see the difference. And the only thing we did was we did thin out the canopy, we got rid of the invasives, but we started grazing it. And the gullies healed, the erosion stopped, and the landowners got a productive bit of ground there. And my favorite saying with cattle is that cows, they can be the best and worst thing for management. All of these sites that we're talking about where we're seeing great returns per acre, we're talking about dairies or beef that are being moved probably every 3 days or less, most of the time every day or less. And we're putting high concentrations of animals onto these sites. The other thing that I did with a lot of these sites too, when you start talking about production and production agriculture, I'm a huge fan of clipping and taking pasture clippings. And my favorite thing to go out there and do is throw a ring in the pasture, a well-managed pasture, and I'll take a sample. I want to know how much dry matter is being produced out there. And then I'll go into the best alfalfa field. My favorite thing to do is, where's your best alfalfa field? Let's take a look at that one, and I'll take a clipping there. And the reality is that most of the time, almost all of the time, a well-managed pasture beats a conventional row crop in Wisconsin in this particular area. We're dealing with cool season grasses in general. And the advantage is that we're working with the way grass grows. We're taking it down to 6 inches, not really any lower than that, and we're letting it grow up to 16 inches. And if you study those grass growth curves, we're grazing it when it's growing exponentially as fast as it's going to go, and we're taking the production off of there. So instead of 3 or 4 clippings, in some cases, we're taking 8 clippings off. In addition to taking more grazings off than harvest off, we've got a much denser stand because we've got more light going down to it. These are all things that I talk about with people, and once they internalize this, grazing's been a lot of fun, and they're doing it on beef operations, on dairy operations, and the really great thing is we're seeing just about instant impacts as far as water quality and even like the soil erosion. Like that's an instant thing that you can see. It stops within a year. Next slide, please. So this is the farm who introduced me to some guy from the Dakotas. I had to put this in here. Justin asked me to talk mostly about the dairy work I'm doing, but this is this guy right here is a gentleman that I met when I was a soil count in a different county. And I love this story because his wife told him that he wasn't going to have more than 20 cows, and he had a set amount of ground that he was grazing. And the only thing that we did the first year was subdivide his existing pasture. The year before, he was out of grass by the end of July. All we did was change the management, subdivide it, and he had grass until October. But he was a lot of fun because he's really started to try to take some of those soil health concepts and really incorporate them onto his farm. He now has, I believe, over 120 beef cows, so he did get a few more than his wife initially said he could have. And he's also doing a lot of different unique things. And I've taken a lot of what he's done and expanded it across the area we work on. So that's why I want to do that. Next slide, please. So a common rotation in Wisconsin for beef operation is going to be corn, grain, soybeans, winter wheat. And after winter wheat, we've got a huge opportunity there. The opportunity is to plant a cover crop, and that's late fall grazing. Now, we can either graze that, or we can roll it and we put some soybeans in there, which is what we've got here. The left picture is some wheat that was rolled. That same year, some of that wheat got grazed. And on the right, we've got corn that was harvested as grain, and we planted vetch in there. That corn, after it was harvested, was grazed, and that particular crop, I believe, we grazed deep into November or December. Now, that's significant because most of the time by the beginning to the middle of October in Wisconsin, we're looking at snow and our grazing season's kind of wrapping up. So to go into the middle or end of November is a pretty big deal, especially when you think about the cost to feed a beef cow is $2.50 to $3 a day. When we did the numbers on this corn, we're less than 50 cents a day. Next slide. The other really cool thing that happened here is we started planting different mixes out there. So this is a really cool 13-way mix that the producer's name is Justin. He actually called Gabe. Gabe gave him his mix, and then he tweaked it to what would work in Wisconsin. And the picture on the right is the cows grazing into this site, and that was grazed up until about February. Now, when you start saying $1 a day or less with establishment, and you're still able to take crops off of there, and you're going into February, that means we're gaining 3 to 4 months of grazing at an extremely cheap cost, but we're also gaining the living root, we're gaining the cover, we're gaining the armor, and all these crops, we're keeping a winter wheat or a winter trit or a winter rye or something like that to go through. So in the spring, we get that plant growth, and we're starting to get the soil to drain out, and we can go and no-till right onto these sites again. I'm not going to say we've got this figured out 100% yet. We are making some strides. It's been a lot of fun. We've had some really weird years, but I see where this is going, and it gets me pretty excited. The other thing that I'd like to say, because of Justin here, that's the name of the farmer here, we've probably got 30 or 40 people doing this now, and I only see it getting bigger with these beef operations. So there's an opportunity with beef, and there's an opportunity with dairy, and we're having a lot of fun with it. And the other cool thing about this is I go back to numbers and university studies, and unfortunately, so many of the beef operations in the state of Wisconsin are operating in the red, and one of the biggest expenses incurred is winter feed. So if we can take 3 months because of cover crops and save them that money, we get soil health, we get economics, we get the cover, we get everything with it, and that's why I'm really excited about promoting this. Next slide, please. And one of the other things we do that we've been doing, particularly on my parents' place since 2003, but I know people have been doing it longer, is bale grazing. And I love this for dry cows, for dairy heifers, for beef animals. It works so well. And it kind of comes back to the whole system thing. We have a lot of snow at times in Wisconsin. And what this does is it allows us to put nutrients out there. We don't have to worry if we come back to that nutrient management model here, and we found that 30-foot bale spacings actually works really well for following an NRCS nutrient management plan. So we're able to get the manure out there. We're able to save the time. And we have animals out there. I mean, we've had negative 50-degree days. And my favorite thing to do on those days is call around and see where the animals are. And chances are about a third of them are out there eating the bale. The one thing I've seen with animals and animal health is that putting them out there and keeping them out there in the winter, you have less pneumonia, you have less labor, you have less cost. So this is just another thing that we try to do to incorporate more diversity, more soil health onto the farm. It also saves labor. Next one. So once again, this was a grazer. The picture on the left, I guess just got to say, she shared it with me. She's successfully grazing now, where 3 years ago I met her, and she was going to build a concrete liquid manure pit and a structure for 30 beef cows. I caught her, we talked about it, and this is where she's at right now. It's just a small beef operation, but she is rotationally grazing right now, and all the animals are direct marketed off farm. So if you have any questions or you want to dive into anything else, let me know. All of the numbers I've referenced are actually from studies or from personal data. So if anybody wants something, please let me know and I can share that.
Well, that's awesome. That's really amazing. Five folks who are really interested in grazing management and soil. I think with that, we are going to go over, as you probably saw in the chat discussion there in the Q&A pod. Apologize for that, but if you need to go, feel free to go. We're going to go till at least another 5 to 10 minutes here, and open up for some questions. I have one for all speakers, I guess. I'm at a training with soil health for really new employees, I guess, and somebody came up and asked the question, how do we get started in this? You know, how do we get started in working on kind of neat stuff you guys are talking about? So if any of you five want to take that question, jump right in.
I'll tell you what I do since I'm still off of mute. I'm a huge fan of copying success. So one of the best things that we've got as NRCS people is we have a huge cadre of contacts. So I like to find somebody who's successfully from an environmental standpoint, who's willing to actually talk about the numbers openly so we know economically they're viable. Then we go take them to that place and have a conversation. Let them see if that's what they want to do. Talk about what works. More importantly, talk about what doesn't work so that way they know what they're getting into.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. Anybody else? Emilio, Reggie?
Sure.
Maybe?
Yeah, this is Emilio. In my experience of training new NRCS range specialists in Arizona in my area is a lot of time these people coming out of college, you know, they start planning these pie in the sky operations without considering the feasibility economically or from a resource standpoint. And going through soil health or rangeland health and getting them to understand those concepts to where they can explain it back to me in simplistic, maybe layman terms, so that I feel comfortable that a rancher or a farmer would understand that. I think that's a really good starting point. So simply put, to have new planners try to explain to me their perspective on soil health and rangeland health.
Excellent, excellent. Reggie, anything to add there?
Sure. One of the things, like I was saying in my presentation, is just being able to go to some of those grazing conferences, to be able to hear actual stories from landowners just like them. They can benefit greatly from that.
Okay. Nadine?
I would echo what Reggie said, and then I've started a series of trainings for folks with one on range health, one on monitoring, one on prescribed grazing, and one on brush management, and going to the site, visiting with the producer about their goals, and then actually going through and planning each of those things so that you can see how they're doing, as Emilio said, and get them some ideas that are outside of the box and maybe not be exactly what they learned in their natural resource management classes, but in more practical applications.
Yeah, yep. I'll give you a chance there, JB, too, on that question.
Yeah, I'll just say be careful and try to meet the farmer where they're at right now. And maybe introduce them to or share some soil health profiles of farmers within their service area or in neighboring counties who have succeeded and are doing some things already that are building soil health that would be applicable to the farmer you're working with. But don't try to force a certain practice such as planting and using diverse annual forage crops into their system, because that might not be what they need to increase diversity of their stand. So plan it according to what they need, what their goals are, and in a way that will ultimately lead to improved soil health.
Okay. Excellent, excellent. Reggie, I know there was a question in the Q&A about if you have the opportunity to provide a standard drawing for that cool floating fence idea. I think a lot of people would be interested in that. Brandon or Bianca, did you notice any other questions that didn't already get answered in the Q&A? Wrote most of them down.
I think they were mostly answered.
I think
there's one about discussing correlating the type of livestock and type of crop for soil health. For example, sheep go well with alfalfa.
Yeah, and that was related to, shoot, I wrote it down too. Was that JB's? No. Anyway, yeah, so using different, it was about the diversity. It was actually related to our opening comment about when we talk about diversity being where we capture that livestock thing, and they were mentioning, talking about diversity within the livestock being important too. And does anybody here, any of our speakers want to comment on that? Do you see a benefit in using diversity in livestock? Kind of putting on the spot.
I'll speak to that real quickly. This is JB.
Okay.
So we've got some grazers here in Virginia who have successfully used different livestock species grazing together or following each other in a very beneficial way, such as combining sheep in with cattle, because the sheep naturally want to graze more broadleaf plants, more forbs, more weeds as compared to cattle, and they complement each other well. The biggest restriction we have to doing more multi-species grazing is most of our farmers don't have fencing or perimeter fencing that will always keep sheep in, but it will keep cattle in. And that's especially the case when we go to grazing goats and cattle. Very few cattle farmers have fences that'll keep a goat in. So that's the biggest restriction or limitation for us to do and to implement more multi-species grazing across farms in Virginia.
Yeah.
I would second that. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep.
We've got quite a few people who are grazing sheep and cattle together, and it's actually a really nice combination, especially when you consider the worming benefits that sheep can have by extending the rotation or even flipping it back and forth. And there have been some real benefits to that, and I do like it. And I definitely agree with the goat comment. I wrote a grazing plan for a goat farmer once, and his comment was, I tell you, if a fence is goat proof, you throw a 5-gallon bucket of water at it, and if any water goes through, so will the goat. And I would have to agree with that. So there are some real challenges when it comes to fencing some of these smaller multi-species, but chickens are another one. Like, we can see some real quick benefits to chicken and poultry production, especially with beef and dairy, and sheep, dairy or beef and chickens all kind of meld really well together. So.
Very good. I didn't get an opportunity there to ask you a question, Emilio, but I did have one on my list here. And if a person was interested in learning more about the range health assessment, whether they're in the western part of the United States or wherever they are, do you have any suggestions on how they would go about learning more about that?
Yeah, that's a good segue. As you know, you and I were involved in creating and developing the Rangeland Health AgLearn course a few years back. So that would be one source. And you may or may not know that version 5 of Interpreting Indicators of Rangeland Health just came out. So it finally made it. It finally made it through the BLM publisher review process, and it's out. And that is one of the better manuals. I refer it to even version 4. Very, very explicit. It explains everything very well, and I refer to it all the time. And then your area or your state grazing land specialist is also a great resource.
Okay. There are regional, the full range health training, field training is out there too, and there's going to be one in Dickinson, North Dakota this year, I believe. So if you want more information on that, let me know.
Yes, there is also, and I forgot to mention that, Stan, there is a national rangeland health training. Last year it was, one of the sessions was here in the Southwest in Las Cruces, New Mexico, which I've been involved with for many years now in that face-to-face training. So there is that opportunity for young planners as well.
Yep.
Hey, Stan, I'd like to make one additional comment. This is JB.
Okay.
Please, everybody, look in the Q&A box. Chris Lawrence was able to put the direct link to that soil coordinator position that's just been advertised here in Virginia. So please copy that and send it out to your network of people. We're really looking for a quality person to apply for that and get in that position to make it useful for all of us.
Thank you. Yeah, JB, I saw that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Brandon or anybody else? I think we got most of them in the Q&A.
Let's see. We have one last one from Aaron Hurd that just came in.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that.
It just came in. Are there options for planning and providing program funding for fence and water development on cropland? What resource concern is being addressed, and are there adjustments to standards and specification changes necessary?
Yes, there are.
Good question.
This is Adam. The first place you can look is NRCS Equip. We cost share on fencing, water lines, and lanes all the time. Obviously, there has to be a resource concern with that. Most of the time, we're looking at a water quality or soil erosion resource, and that's how we have been justifying seeding the site down to grass and then grazing it. It's been a great tool to get people started. The other option that a lot of different states have, I'm not sure across the country, but definitely in the upper Midwest here, is the counties or the soil districts. They have funding for the same practices that NRCS has. The one thing that I have to encourage you is work with somebody who understands what a good grazing layout looks like, so that way you're able to set up a fence and it works with cattle flow and it can actually jive with what your plans are.
So I think, so Aaron actually works for the NRCS, so I think his question was more related towards cropland versus grazing land.
Yep.
Gotcha. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. So yeah, in South Dakota, there is a soil health initiative under EQIP where they do cost share on fence and water on cropland, and part of it is you have to be in that initiative, you have to apply, I think it's conservation crop rotation, cover crops, no-till, and prescribed grazing to get the whole package, and then you can get the cost share for fence and water. So if people want more information about that, maybe it'd be easier just contact me direct and I can get you some information there. But that is a state initiative, and they're working towards making it permanent though. Anyway, anybody else? Nadine, I saw you start to type. Did you have something
No,
you wanted to add?
that's covered.
Okay. Or Reggie or JB or Emilio, if you have any other ideas on that question. Otherwise, I think
No.
there's no. Go ahead.
No, I didn't. No.
Okay, all right. Great. I think Bianca, I don't know if you want to kind of close this out, but I think that's a lot of really neat information, especially from my standpoint anyway. And I appreciate all of you for speaking today. And I imagine you'll be getting emails and contacts with more questions and thoughts as well from folks. So Bianca, do you want to say anything else, or Brandon?
I know Bianca was having connection issues, but no, I will just say thank you, everyone. It was very informative, and really appreciate you taking the time. So thanks again.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Right. You too. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.